This has been the week of the release of the Epstein emails and you know, the endless demand for the release of the Epstein files. Did you ever meet Jeffrey Epstein?
I never met him, thankfully, but I found out recently that he was at Donald's second wedding, his wedding to Marla Maples, and I was there too. So I have had the great misfortune of being in the same room with Jeffrey Epstein, which is alarming enough, but thankfully, no, I never met him. I wouldn't have been considered worthy of meeting him.
Meaning what?
Weird way of putting it.
Meaning you're too old, or
no? Oh, jeez, no. Although that's a horrifying thought, I probably would have been at that point. No, that I wasn't somebody that Donald ever would have gone out of his way to introduce to his close friends and inner circle.
Okay, so what was your impression of? I mean, was he attractive to women? Did women cleave to him? Did he behave inappropriately at all with women?
Donald?
Yeah.
I never saw anything inappropriate. He was sexist for sure. Like everybody in my family, including the women, were misogynists. He and my Uncle Robert treated my grandmother in a very infantilizing, disrespectful way, and it was very obvious that they didn't respect women and didn't think women should have any power. And common dinner table conversation would be talking about all of the ugly fat women or talking about the beautiful women and how they were classed by the men in my family. My dad wasn't like that at all, but also he wasn't really included in a lot of the conversations.
And just to remind people, your father was Donald Trump's older brother, and
yes.
he died when he was 42 of causes related to alcoholism, and
yes.
you were 16.
Yes, and I mean, that was a very big complicating factor, certainly in my dad's life, but in mine as well. He was the oldest son in the Trump family. He was the namesake. He was Fred Jr. He was supposed to take over the empire from my grandfather, and obviously that didn't work out. So that set my dad's life on a pretty awful trajectory, especially after he started drinking and was never able to rehabilitate himself in his father's mind. And then simply by virtue of the fact that I was Freddie's daughter and a girl, nobody in the family had any interest in me or anything I wanted to do or had to say.
But you've now turned it into a career.
The irony. That is a sort of sobering way to look at it, but it also happens to be true. What is unfortunate, though, is that Donald Trump is the most, or arguably the most powerful person on the planet, and has shown himself to be willing to be destructive and cruel as possible to get power and wealth for himself. So it would feel utterly irresponsible for me to step aside and say nothing. Watching all of this unfold and trying to play some small role has felt like a way to stay grounded in a fight that's much bigger than he is. Stepping away and washing my hands of it for me, I wouldn't be able to live with myself.
In your first book that came out in 2020, you called him the most dangerous man in the world. Yeah. It's very clear that people are scared of him. Do you recognize why people are scared of him? Were you scared of him when you were growing up? Were people around him in the family scared of him?
I honestly find it unfathomable that anybody would ever be scared of Donald. He's the weakest, most pathetic person I've ever known, and there is nothing about him that's threatening. So I think it's important to step back and put that designation in context. He was and remains the world's most dangerous man because of power that was given to him by other people. So Donald is the result of a myth my grandfather started a long time ago. My dad was not going to cut it as my grandfather's heir So he turned to Donald and made use of him.
When did Donald become your grandfather's favourite son? And talk to us about how he sort of moulded Donald, or how the intensity of their relationship grew.
Yeah, I think it's more accurate to say he became useful. And it happened probably simultaneously to his discovering that my father was not the right person. My grandfather wanted a killer to be the one to take over. And my dad was, despite being very smart, you cannot be a stupid person and put yourself through flight school and start flying 707s at the age of 25. He was sensitive, though. He was kind. He was generous. These are not qualities valued by the Trump family at all. At the same time, as Donald is a teenager, my grandfather is seeing he's belligerent, he's disrespectful, he's never wrong, he's the best, he's the this, the that, and that resonated with my grandfather. And then from there, he realized that Donald had something my grandfather did not have in the way he needed to. He had media savvy. He had an ability to self-promote that far exceeded my grandfather's. So that became very valuable because my grandfather, as successful as he was in Queens and Brooklyn, never was able to make the move into Manhattan. He needed somebody with Donald's personality and essentially lack of self-awareness and willing to take credit for things that he didn't do to put himself out there as shamelessly as Donald did.
And your father didn't cut it because he wanted to be a pilot. He didn't want to go into real estate.
Actually, my father had every intention of going into real estate. He worked for my grandfather every summer. After he graduated from college, he was a business major. He went to work for my grandfather, assumed he was going to be my grandfather's right-hand man. But for reasons that we don't fully know, my grandfather just didn't like my dad and was not willing to give him any power. He treated him poorly. He humiliated him in front of the other employees. And finally, my dad just couldn't take it anymore. And that's when he decided, and this must have taken such enormous courage, it's hard for me to imagine that he was able to do it. He quit, and then he applied for jobs at TWA. He got accepted into their class in 1964, but because of the pressure he was getting at home and because of the contempt my grandfather had for that kind of achievement. I mean, being a pilot for TWA at the dawn of the jet age was kind of a big deal in 1964. That's when my dad started drinking. And his career as a pilot for TWA lasted 8 months.
Because of his drinking?
Yes.
So let's just go back to Donald Trump again. Mm-hmm. And so he became the de facto older son. He inherited his father's business, the real estate business. One of the things I find just puzzling is, why is everybody so scared of him? Yeah,
I think it depends on the context, right? As I was saying earlier, Donald, from the beginning, has been of use to smarter, more powerful people, beginning with my grandfather. And for people not paying a lot of attention, that sort of created an aura. Donald, that is, acted as if my grandfather's wealth was actually his wealth, that he was a self-made man. And my grandfather actually helped him construct that story that was fabricated out of whole cloth. And then the New York media ran with it, and the banks threw money at him. And then Mark Burnett rehabilitated him, and then, of course, the Republican Party did. So he went from being somebody who was essentially a tool for other people, whether it was my grandfather to get the kind of recognition for his business and the kind of wealth he wanted, or New York media selling papers, or NBC having a hit show, or the Republican Party having somebody with the kind of charisma that appealed to their base, to becoming somebody who actually does have real power in the world and has shown himself perfectly willing to use it in ways both illegitimate and terrifying.
So he's sort of always been an example of fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
And then, amazingly, he has made it. How is he planning to get through this next sort of period where everybody is screaming about Epstein right now?
Well, there have been so many opportunities over the last few years, and this honestly has been one of the most demoralizing things to have witnessed, where the Republican Party or the American people could have taken an off-ramp away from Donald and for various reasons chose not to. This is another opportunity for that. Again, though, the problem is that far too many people see Donald as the only viable way for the Republican Party to stay in power, or as individuals to maintain their power. Republican politicians are afraid of getting primaried. Paramount, for example, is afraid of not having their merger go through. So we see all of these individuals and entities, many of whom do have legitimate power and wealth of their own, capitulating because they want more power and wealth. So I think in some ways, just quickly getting back to the question of fear, for a lot of these people, it's not about fear as much as it's about their bottom line. Like, I think we can make a very good argument that if all large media corporations had stuck together, if all white shoe law firms and universities had stuck together and refused to capitulate, we would be in a very different situation right now. Certainly that's the case with the Republican Party. So the question is, do rank and file Republicans have the power to force people who have proven themselves to be loyalists at whatever cost, Pam Bondi, Todd Blanche, Kash Patel, to do something that they must know on some level could be utterly destructive to the future of Donald Trump, the Trump regime, and so-called Trumpism?
Okay, so let's talk about his health. I'm sure you're very cognizant of the health issues in your family. Your grandfather and your grandmother had dementia. When you look at Donald Trump as a trained psychologist, what do you see?
Just to be clear, I'm a clinical psychologist, not a neuropsychologist, but I know enough about how to assess certain kinds of neurological disorders. And of course, as you said, my grandfather had Alzheimer's for a very, very long time. So I'm more comfortable speaking about the untreated, long-standing psychiatric disorders Donald's had, but there are times I look at him and I see my grandfather. I see that same look of confusion. I see that he does not always seem to be oriented to time and place. His short-term memory seems to be deteriorating. And obviously, this is somebody who has never had a great deal of impulse control, but that too is deteriorating as well. So there are many, many red flags and many questions that are not being answered by the administration.